you need to balance from a legacy perspective for each of these communities, right? So you don't want to be known as a person who was only focused on the stock markets, or only focused on employees, or only focused on government, relations or community. I think finding that balance is important. It's difficult, by the way, to you have to work hard to kind of find that balance. But if you can help each of these communities create intergenerational wealth or success, and that comes through, first of all, physical and mental health, second, education, and third, money, right? So in that order. But if you can create these communities, whether it's your employees, your stockholders, if you can make their lives better, if you can make sure they have an opportunity for education, is more important than putting your name on a college building or buying some asset.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are here at the Immigrant Nation podcast, where we go beyond the headlines and into the heart of immigrants' experiences that are reshaping industries, communities, and the future. Today's episode has been brought to you by Medicab, your trusted partner in non-emergency medical transport and private ambulance services, with locations in Texas and Florida. Get more information at www.medicaptrans.com. Again, that's www.medicaptrans.com. Now, our guest, Ashish Chand, has served as President and Chief Executive Officer of Belden since February of 2023 and is a member of the company's board of directors. He joined Belden in 2002, and obviously you can tell he's been there for over 20 years, talking about the power of sticking with it, which is what we push toward in our show. Dr. Chad has also been the Executive Vice President of Industrial Automation Solutions since July of 2019 and a Managing Director at Belden Asia Pacific from August of 2017. He is currently based in San Francisco area Bay in California, USA.
So, one of the things I was reflecting on really is that what are some of the leadership concepts that I've learned, especially as I've moved across different continents, as you put it, Martin, and cultures. At a very basic level, I think the most important lesson for me has been, as a leader, you must take all blame and share all credit, right? And I know I come from Asia, where the culture is maybe a little less individualistic, a little more collective, right? And I think in the US, actually it's the opposite. It's a little more individual focused, right? And
yeah,
I kind of find it interesting. Sometimes I meet with leaders here in the US. They find it difficult to take blame and share credit. But I think coming from my background, I find it easier to do that. And I've worked in Australia, I've worked in Hong Kong, I've worked in India, and now in the US. And I think universally, your team does a better job when they know that whatever feedback you might give them in private, behind closed doors, but in public, you will always accept the main responsibility and blame for anything that goes wrong. And when things go right, before you take any credit for yourself, you will share it with your colleagues and your entire group. And I think when you do that, people just go out of their way to make everything successful to the extent they can, right? So that, I think, is an important learning for me. I think the other important learning for me, just on the same thought process, has been, it's better to be grounded and humble and say, I don't know this, versus some leaders feel pressurized to always say, I know the answer. So it's okay to say, hey, I know many answers, but I don't know all the answers. right? Now, if you say, I don't know any answers, that's not helpful, of course, as a leader. Then, of course, if you don't know any answers, then, maybe you're not ready for leadership. But I think it's okay to say, I don't have all the answers, but I intend to find out the answers with your help. And I want to be pragmatic about it. I want to find the best way to find the answer without, having to go through a full PhD. And I think when you let people know that you don't have all the answers, a lot more people will speak up and give you good input and ideas. Versus they feel, if you say you have all the answers, they feel they have no room to speak. And then you don't get any good ideas or direction or input. So I think these are things that are universally true across different businesses, different types of organizations, even different countries. But of course, to be a leader in a certain domain, you also have to build some technical knowledge of that domain. For example, Martin, you're doing podcasts. You know how to, curate the experience, get the right guest, get the right kind of conversation going, and manage some of the technical details. So you have to technically understand how to set up a podcast. And I think similarly, some people feel that if you are humble, if you are grounded, if you're nice to people, then you don't need to have all the technical knowledge. I don't think that's true. You need both. But if you had only an understanding. Now, if you had only the technical knowledge and you didn't have the interpersonal skills,
yes,
that's a bigger problem.
At least an understanding.
But vice versa, if you had really good interpersonal skills, but not even an understanding of the technical issues, I think that's also a problem, right? So you have to be pragmatic and kind of balance both sides. And one thing I find with immigrant leaders is that they feel that they have to do everything on their own. They must do everything. They must do everything on their own. They have to prove some point that, in spite of being an immigrant, I've managed to do this. But the reality is, Martin, that the best outcomes are only made possible by a team. Because whatever you try to do, you are differentiating from somebody else. And you can only be differentiated from somebody else when more things come together, and that's only possible through teamwork. Right? So I think my one recommendation I have for immigrant leaders is don't take yourself too seriously. Don't try to be the Superman or Superwoman trying to fly the whole thing on your own. Build a team and understand your role on that team. Sometimes, even as the leader, your role might be to take the back seat and to facilitate somebody else in that particular moment, because they know more about that issue technically than you do. And there could be another time when there's a crisis, and at that point your role is to take the lead, even if you don't understand all the issues, because there's a crisis and somebody needs to make a decision. Then you step up, right? So I think building the team, understanding your role in that team at different points in time, that's kind of important. And I think another aspect of the immigrant leader is this: you certainly have a responsibility as an immigrant to share. But that should not undermine your main job. So if you become a CEO, you're not an immigrant CEO, you are a CEO who happens to be an immigrant. your main job is still to be the CEO of that business or that company, right? And I think if you can bring all the elements of your immigrant status into your work, understanding,
Yes.
and it can improve you and you can share more, that's great. But if you only did that and did not do the main job, then it wouldn't last very long. So I think, and you've interviewed a number of successful leaders. I think you would have probably felt the same way, that they're really good at their job and they're also willing to share and take a responsibility, right? And not vice versa, right? That's not very helpful. So one thing that I picked up over time, talking about being grounded and talking about humility, one thing I picked up over time is when I interview people for jobs, sometime during the interview, I ask them, what is your ambition? What is it that you're trying to do? What is your ambition? And you'll be surprised, Martin. And by the way, this is true even in Asia, it's true in Australia, it's true in the US. But typically, 70% of the people that I have asked this question of, they respond with the 3-letter acronym when I ask them their ambition. So it's like CEO, CFO, EVP, whatever, CMO. And I normally respond to them saying, but that's only a title, right? What is your actual ambition? And it turns out a lot of these people, even when I ask them the question a second time, they're fixated on the title, on the role, without realizing that the role is only temporary.
They don't know.
Our job in any role is to make it better than we found it, right? And then we move on and somebody else does that role, and then they move on and then somebody else does that role, right? So I think what is really important from an ambition standpoint of view to me is if a person expresses a problem that they think they can help solve. That problem could be a global problem like global warming. It could be a national problem like a country's food situation or debt or technology orientation. It could be an industry problem. It could be a problem for a specific set of customers or one customer. It could even be a personal problem for that person. For example, I met somebody who said, my ambition is that I want to have more money for sending my parents home because they are not very wealthy. Okay, that's fine, right? But it's a problem and the person thinks they can solve the problem.
Yeah.
And what I've found is across cultures, when people are able to express their ambition in the form of a problem that can be solved through their effort, those people can actually go the distance. They can really create value for themselves, for their organization, for their community. And my approach to helping develop talent is I always find such people and then I give them a real problem. Somebody who's a problem solver, you give them a real problem, a problem that it's not just a theoretical problem, not a paper problem, but a real problem that'll, if it's solved, it'll create value for the organization or value for the industry or the community, right? And as you solve one after another few problems, that's how you develop your own talent and you become more valuable to the organization. So literally, when I do the interviews, going back to where I started this conversation, if somebody expresses their ambition as a 3-letter acronym, I typically cancel them from my selection process. But if somebody expresses a problem that they want to solve, even if it's a humble problem, I'll take them to the next step in the selection process, and then I'll try to ask them to frame the problem. Why is it worth solving the problem? And you know, such people, I think, are really able to grow in the organization. Yeah. Let me pause here. You're looking very thoughtful. Any questions? Any comments from your side?
Well, so as you're speaking and I'm listening, I'm ingesting what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm also putting myself through those processes. I'm like, okay, that may be me, and okay, I need to work on that. And as you went into the hiring process, you know, my thought is following you with the idea of, okay, now we're going to where we're building leaders, right? And so before we really get into the meat of why we're building leaders, I have to go back. And what I understood from your points is that you're what I would consider a servant leader. You want to make sure that your team has the tools, the knowledge, the skills, the space to be able to be successful at what your expectation is of them. But at the same time, you want them to own the success that they create, right? And you want to take the back road. For me, that's a servant leader. Having traversed across the globe, through all the many cultures you've gone through and through all the many steps of leadership that you've gone through, when did you get to a point where you decided this is a better approach to lead people? And does that approach traverse across cultures?
Yeah. You know, I was going to head in that direction. So very good nudge from you, Martin. I think you're very perceptive. I early in my career, so I've worked in the same company now for 23 years, and I joined them in 2002. And in 2008, when I was still, you know, rather young, we had a problem in that we had acquired a large company that was based in China. And after we acquired the company, you know, we kind of concluded that it was not maybe the most strategic decision we had made. And I was asked to go to Hong Kong, where the company was headquartered, but it had about 3,000-4,000 you know, employees in China mainly, with 5 different plants. I was asked to go to Hong Kong, manage that business, turn it around because it had started losing some money, but then to keep a small portion that we wanted and sell the rest, divest the rest of the business. And you know, American corporations, they do this buying and selling of companies, you know, so it's not surprising. And when I was given this task, I was still inexperienced, and I had not really, I mean, I had led a small business, but nothing of this size. And instead of asking myself the question, what would be the challenges in doing this, and therefore what should I learn, what should I keep my eyes and ears open for, I convinced myself that they must have chosen me because I'm very smart. Right? So
Very interesting conclusion.
Yeah, I fell into the, you know, the trap of assuming that if I have been given a position, I must be ready for it automatically, right? Versus I've been given a position and I must find a way to accomplish the responsibility. So when I first showed up in Hong Kong, as you can imagine, you know, the local team was not very friendly towards me, because, you know, I was walking around pretending I knew everything. And as it is, we had acquired this company. Now they were not doing very well. We had some plans to sell a large portion of the company. Even though that plan was confidential, some people had already guessed that we were going to do that, right? So anyway, they didn't like anybody who had come from the headquarters or from the parent company. Plus, I was young, and in China there is a certain respect for age, and I was pretending as if I already knew everything. So really bad
May,
mix.
let me budge in,
Yeah,
Ashish. I have found myself in the same place, and I want to get this because we were going to talk about M&As, right? We're going to talk
yeah,
about mergers and
yeah,
acquisitions,
yeah,
and I think this is really, really important, right? Because I learned a very expensive, hard, painful lesson through this same problem, right? Assuming that I know enough, or I know what I need to know to lead an organization, and going in with my own ideas of what the organization should look like, only to realize a few months later that I was in the wrong place.
yeah.
It seems you came to almost a similar realization. For me, you left the US, you went to China. Was the harsh face of reality based on your misunderstanding of the Chinese work ethic and culture? Or was it a myriad of interpretations based on your perception that I knew everything I needed to do and they need to learn from me?
Yeah, very good framing, Martin. I think you've been exactly in the same place. I think it was more the latter, a little bit of the former. And just to correct the record, I went from India to China. I was not based in the US at that time, although I worked for the US corporation. I had moved
Okay.
from Australia to India and then from India to China. Now, I think I was looking at the problem, from the Western MBA mindset. Here's a problem, here are all the variables and factors,
Yeah.
and here's how we can address the problem. It's very obvious. Here are the financial issues, here are the operational issues. But I was not looking at the problem at all through the cultural lens. So that was one issue. And the other thing is, there were many things to learn about the Chinese market, the customers, the regulations, the policies that I did not know. So before I could conduct any business meaningfully, I should have learned all that. But within a few months of reaching there, I was beaten down to size, and I was kind of not doing very well in my job at that point. And interestingly, I spoke with a customer, and usually you speak to people within your organization for advice, but frankly, not too many people in the American headquarters had any Chinese experience. We had acquired a company without really understanding everything about the culture. So, but there were some good customers, and they wanted that company to do well because they were buying from that company for a long time, for over 30 years. They wanted that company to do well. And this customer, he and I started becoming more friendly over time. And then he asked me one day, he said, "Hey, I noticed that some of the colleagues who come with you, you guys don't seem to have a lot of interpersonal kind of chemistry. What is going on? They speak, when they see you, they start speaking in Chinese. They don't speak in English, So I explained to him. So he explained to me a few things. He said, first of all, in China, there's a lot of respect for age and seniority. Secondly, they want you to be part of their collective culture rather than instructing them. And before you ask for information, so in the US, authority is driven by position. If my title says X, I ask you for information, you have to give it to me.
Yeah.
In Asia, especially in China, authority is driven by trust and credibility. It doesn't matter what your position is. If I trust you and you have credibility that you will use the information correctly, I will give it to you. If not, I will find some excuse. So authority is not driven solely by the role or the position title or what it says on your business card. Authority is driven by your past actions and how you either used or abused trust in the past. If you build trust over time, people will share more information with you. Doesn't matter what your position is. So I learned all these lessons, and the one thing I did, for example, was I used to have the parent company's business card and email address, etc. I changed it to the subsidiary company. I started putting on the same uniform that they used to wear, which is like a blue jacket. I started introducing myself not as an employee of the parent company, but as an employee of the subsidiary company, right? And over time, I would make sure that in any meeting, I would first ask the senior most people by age for their opinion. And over time, I built trust. It took me about 6 to 9 months, actually. But I came to a point where, now we were all operating as a team. And that whole project of turning around and selling that company, which my colleagues in the US thought could be done in 6 to 12 months, it actually took 3 years. It took 3 years because...
Still a really short time.
It's short time, yeah. In China, especially to sell a company, it took 3 years, but it was done successfully. We involved, at the right time, we involved customers to make sure that they were not going to be harmed in any way with the change in ownership. We took care of the people and what new jobs they will get in the new under the new ownership. There was a lot more focus on making people successful, and therefore the company would be successful automatically. Versus the idea that a company could be successful even if the people are not successful, right? So that's culturally...
Which is what you see mostly in the capitalistic market in the Western culture.
It's changing. I see some companies really changing their approach, but for the most part, I think that's correct. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I think those companies would be even more successful if their people were successful.
So, if you were speaking to a bunch of immigrant CEOs, and this sounds like a really great turning point, what would your appeal be for them?
Yeah. First of all, when you go in as an immigrant, sometimes you see people not being able to adjust to certain environments, right? And I think it's important to distinguish between ignorance and arrogance, first of all. Are people pushing back on you because they don't know where you come from and your culture, or are they pushing back on you because they're arrogant? And similarly, you should not do that. If you are ignorant, then be honest and say, I don't know your culture and your business, I want to learn more, versus being arrogant, right? So I think that's really important. I think it's also important to have a sense of humor and just kind of, sometimes just not get overly serious about every small thing that is said. But on a more serious note, I have two things here. One is, really, as an immigrant CEO, as an immigrant leader, you're dealing with both a weakness and a strength. And the reason you're there is because presumably the strength is bigger than the weakness. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it to that point, right? The weakness is maybe you don't understand everything about a certain culture. The strength is you're a problem solver, you're very resilient, you have proven some things to get to that place. So play on that strength and avoid the weakness, right? So really be humble, ask questions, learn more, clarify. Don't worry about being called, oh, they don't know anything, or they're asking too many basic questions. It's okay. Basic questions are required for basic topics, right? And then the last thing I'll say is, on the other side of the balance, don't underestimate what you bring, and don't overestimate what those people bring, because sometimes they can look very fashionable and flashy, and they speak very fast and speak very well, and you might assume that they know many things. It may not be true. And don't underestimate what you bring, because being an immigrant is a very tough thing. You are going into a completely new environment confidently, and you are trying to create relationships and business outcomes. So don't underestimate that strength, right? So I'm saying it's a balance, Martin. I think on the one hand, it's important to be humble, to ask questions. On the other hand, it's important to be confident in your own strengths, and not to get too carried away just because somebody speaks very well.
So really, again, what I am getting to see is your depth in the interpretation and understanding of what servant leadership is, and the humbling experiences you had in the past of what that is, how that has changed you as a leader and has allowed you to be able to lead from the front by taking a backseat. And so I have a very interesting person that I admire quite a bit. And his name is Simon Sinek. And he gives a really good example of what servant leadership is. And he talks about his experience working with military forces or special forces in the military, where their leaders will eat last. When I was in the army, I learned that very quickly, right? Being a young soldier, I would watch my leaders first have us get in line practically to eat first, and they would eat last. And I thought that was a very interesting way of doing things, because coming from the culture of the African, the big men ate first. They ate the best food first, and then it went to women and children. Actually, in my culture, women and children ate in a different room, right? And so, so I thought that was a really good way to get people to work together. When you were in China, how different was leadership there compared to when you work in Australia?
Yeah, a few different things. So first of all, starting on a slightly lighter note, uh, when I was working in Australia, I literally had to tell people, hey, here are all the things that you must do. Because if you didn't tell them, they won't do them. Because their culture was like, okay, just do what you're told to do. And then some of them would leave early and go for a pint or whatever, right? In China, I literally had to make a list of things saying, here are all the things you must not do. Because in China, they will keep doing it. Sometimes they don't stop, and sometimes in that process they also break the rules, because they don't follow the quality process, or they may not follow the safety process, and you have to say, hey, don't walk on this side of the yellow line, because it's unsafe. But you have to write that.
Yeah.
Otherwise they'll walk. So it's interesting, first of all, in terms of just how do you set the guidelines and the agenda. So that was something interesting. I think the other thing really was uh, again, in Australia, authority comes from position. Even if a person just started yesterday, if he has the position, people will follow that leader. In China, they're not going to follow anybody who hasn't proven himself or herself first, right? No matter what the position. They, they want you to build credibility before they will follow you. Um, which, by the way, becoming a leader by building credibility is more difficult than becoming a leader simply by acquiring a position, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think so. So there are some interesting differences, but of course, there are pros and cons of every culture. I think, Martin, if I kind of put a ribbon on this section around culture or cross cultural management, I think cross cultural management and leadership is one of the most difficult skills because you can't learn it without experiencing it. You can't learn it from a book. You can't learn it from a YouTube video. You can't learn it by talking to other people. You can only learn it by experiencing it. So I think my message to people who want to become good cross-cultural leaders is to get out and go to those places and go to those cultures and learn in real time. I think this is one of those strengths that you can acquire if you can successfully navigate different cultures. Um, and there are some tools available. By the way, it's not just mumbo jumbo. There are some tools, and there's also a lot of misinformation. For example, I met somebody who said, "Oh, in Japan, you must give your visiting card with both hands." I said, that's not necessarily true. I mean, you don't have to. It's not required. But I think in Japan, what you have to respect is that people will not give you a decision at the first meeting.
I've had that before,
Yeah,
actually.
that you have to respect, right? Whether you give them your card with both hands or one hand doesn't change that. The cultural thing to learn is that. So I actually I did a PhD in where I combined mergers and acquisitions and valuation, and I combined cultural distance, national cultural distance. And when I did that, I found some frameworks which can help you learn about different cultures, what is important to them, what is less important to them. And it's good to get education before you go to a new place, and rather than applying some stories you've heard, it's better to get some real technical knowledge on that. um, so I wanted to talk a little bit about building on this cultural aspect. I wanted to talk a little bit about long-term strategic planning.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Ashish, if you don't mind, I know you asked if you could put a ribbon on it, but I want to
Okay,
undo a
please,
ribbon
please.
because this is
Yes.
important, right? Um, as a leader who leads other leaders, how do you develop your leaders? And why is it important for immigrant CEOs, business owners to learn the value of developing leaders within their teams?
Yeah. So let me answer the second question first, and then we'll talk about my approach to developing leaders. I think for immigrant CEOs, immigrant leaders, we already spoke about the fact that they try to do everything on their own. And they have to realize that they won't grow unless they grow people, one level below them, and then encourage those people to grow people one level below them. Because it's a cascade, right? And at some point, you will leave your role and somebody else will do it, and you've got to prepare a role for that future. So I think it's important that if you want to grow as an immigrant leader, you have to let some things go and develop people to do those things. But how do I think about developing leader. So first of all, I try to calibrate with people on my team uh, the difference between tasks that are strategic, tactical, and operational. Operational tasks, ideally, should be things that are decisions made by somebody on their team. And as long as the process is followed, it doesn't even have to come to them for approval. For example, how do we purchase some raw material for that week's production? It's an operational task. A tactical task or a tactical decision is something that they, as a leader, need to make that decision, but they don't need to inform all their colleagues, really. So, for example, the same idea of procuring raw material, how do we choose which vendor we should buy the raw material from? That's a tactical decision, right? It has some, it's not something you want to leave only to the lower management. You want to get involved in that because it has some repercussions on business continuity and ethics and financial aspects. And then strategic, the next level of decision making. For example, on the same concept, a strategic decision could be, hey, now that we have the tariff situation, which country should we buy a raw material from? Right? It's a different level of decision. And in this decision, you want to get a recommendation from the lower management. You want to make a recommendation to your colleagues and agree as a team because it has implications on the entire company. So first of all, I think I ask my people to calibrate all their work, just kind of separate into these three buckets, roughly. Then I ask them, how much time are you spending on operational decisions? And I want them to minimize that. Because if they're not, basically they're not delegating their decisions to people, and those people will never learn how to make the next level decision because you're making you're micromanaging your people. That's not good. And then on the tactical decisions, my question to them is, did you have to do all the research and make the recommendation on your own, or did you team up with some of your people? They gave you some research and you were able to make a decision based on that information. And then strategic, of course, my point to them is, I want you to maximize some of your time on that. And I think what happens is a lot of people don't separate these three. So then they deal with decisions in the same order as they come across their desk or their inbox, right? And sometimes a less strategic decision may take more time and consume your bandwidth, and you're robbing somebody else of the opportunity to learn how to make that decision. So I know this is probably, it's a more pragmatic framework versus, some high level theory, but I literally ask my people to maintain a log for, let's say, 1 or 2 weeks and tell me honestly, how did they bucket in these three buckets and how much time did they spend on each? And what I find is when I do that, most of my people automatically get the coaching to build their team's capabilities.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting, actually. And so let's separate culture, culture, values, and leadership. As immigrant CEOs are listening to us, they're watching our conversation. When at some point you have to look at your own cultural values and then the cultural values of the people who are surrounding you, right? How did you separate those two?
Yeah. So for example, in my situation, I sometimes go to leadership meeting or one of our internal sales conferences, etc. I may have people from 15 or 20 different nationalities, multiple subcultures, etc. I try to do three things. First of all, Martin. First, I typically try to find out, even before I go for an event, typically a week before that, who will I be interacting with, and not to stereotype anybody, but at least to understand their background, right? Okay, there are going to be 20% people from Germany, 10% from here, etc. So I kind of figure that out. That helps me, that arms me with some information. I may do some quick research around, what's going on in that country today. What are some of the issues people are worried about? What are some of the issues people are excited about, right? So I try to find that out. Second, I also try to learn about some of the contributions that those teams have made in the past into the business. Some people are very proud about, something that was done 10 years ago. They introduced a new technology, a new product. So I try to find out some of their achievements. And then I also try to find out what are some of the opportunities going forward for each of those subcultures. So when I prepare my remarks, and even though I normally speak without any notes, but I do a lot of preparation. I think preparation is so important, right? I do make it a point to cover for each of those cultures, 2 out of those 3 things. So something about that culture, something about the past achievements, something about the opportunity. I may not be able to do, if there are 10 different nationalities in a room, I can't do everybody. But first of all, I will go in prepared with remarks that are fairly broad in terms of addressing some of these cultural opportunities and recognizing their contributions. But then I'll also talk about, where I come from, Asia. The reality is that today our business in Belden, we are doing something very interesting. We used to supply network hardware to different industries. And we used to supply different components, and we never used to supply all of that as one system. So we would supply connectors to somebody, cables to somebody else, switches and routers to somebody else, software to somebody else. So network hardware and some software to different people. But then some of our customers started talking to us about, hey, can you help us solve a bigger problem by supplying the whole thing? Because we have multiple equipment. For example, you have in your studio multiple equipment, and that equipment could come from different manufacturers and they don't talk to each other. And a customer said, can you supply an integrated backbone with the software and hardware so that all our multiple things will get connected? And we started doing that for airports. We started doing that for refineries. We started doing that for metro companies, for train stations, for train companies. And all of this happened in Asia. Because in Asia, those companies, if you think about the last 30 years, there's been a lot of growth in Asia, in airports, in trains, in petrochemical refining, etc. But they don't have the experience. It's a little bit like Africa today, right? They need those services, they need those products, but they don't have all the technical experience, unlike in Germany or in the US.
Yes.
So we used to come in and help them put everything together, even though they didn't have the expertise in their own organization. That was the role we played. Interestingly, now our customers in Germany and the US and Canada are saying, we want that same, we want that same solution, because things are getting so complex with AI and edge technology and cloud based requirements. They're saying we need that. So it's interesting. And this is an example. I never shy away from sharing with people that the strategy that we have as a company today, it was first developed in Asia. And I'm proud of that, right? But I also don't kind of rub it in their faces and say, Asia is better than you. I don't say that, right? But I always say, let's be honest. Here are the facts. We developed the strategy in Asia. Now it's relevant in multiple parts of the world. And we all need to work together, including the Asians in the room and the Germans in the room and the Americans in the room, to make this successful. And there are many things we have to learn from the Asian team in terms of how they did this. But the American team can also give feedback to improve it. So I think where I'm going with this example, Martin, is that there is no reason to hide the achievements of your own culture.
Yes.
Without necessarily trying to undermine somebody else. And I've seen some leaders will not do that. I don't know why. Maybe there are different reasons, but sometimes they say, oh, no, now we're American, we don't want to talk about Asia or Africa or the Middle East or whatever. But I think it's important to do that.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. All right, so we got to the point where we tied the ribbon and untied the ribbon. Now can we tie the ribbon? And
yeah,
because I'm curious, I'm really curious.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about strategic planning and bring some flavor in for immigrant leaders, because I think sometimes they view it differently. So, interestingly, my view, strategy is really about creating differentiation. There was a time when people used to say the essence of strategy is to create monopoly. I don't think that's true anymore in today's world. You're not trying to create a monopoly industry. Although, you can argue, Martin, and some companies have a monopoly situation. I understand. But what you're trying to do, your strategy should be focused on creating differentiation. And you need to separate differentiation into two categories. One is differentiation that somebody can buy if they had the money. And the second is differentiation that even if they had the money, it would be difficult for them to get. So for example, if the only difference between you and your neighbor is that you had an expensive car, then they could also buy the car. But if the differentiation was not only did you have an expensive car, but you had trained how to drive that car for 3 years, then it would take them 3 years to catch up with you. Right?
Right.
So, by definition, therefore, the most valuable differentiation are the non-financial barriers to entry. If you can create something which cannot be just purchased by spending money, it's therefore a non-financial barrier to entry, that's the biggest differentiation. And if you think about the non-financial barriers to entry, there are 3. Skills.
Okay.
These are technical skills that people have, or you encourage them to have, to build. The second is capabilities. When you apply those skills to build something tangible for a customer or for a user. And culture, the way you do that. So skills is just technical capabilities, knowledge. Technical skill, knowledge. Capabilities are what you can build for a customer or a user, and culture is how you do that. So what I find is companies that have really good strategic planning, they focus on these 3 things. And all the financial barriers to entry, that's okay, but they know that somebody else can also pay money and get those. right? So you can't differentiate for a long time based on that category. But what I find sometimes with immigrant leaders, it's very interesting. Even though many immigrant leaders come from cultures that focus on non-financial capability more than financial capability, sometimes when they come to, especially to the US, they think only in financial terms.
Okay.
It's interesting. I've noticed this, right? I sometimes, when I'm talking to groups and I'm discussing strategy, some of the immigrants always have financial questions, and they don't seem as interested in building the long-term capability and the culture.
What's the driver for that?
I have a feeling, and I'm guessing, they've come from typically cultures and backgrounds that are less wealthy than the one they have come to. One of the reasons they migrated is because they were migrating to a higher standard of living, more wealthy place, and they feel that they need to focus on that aspect. But it's a little bit of a tragedy because what they bring is more capability, skill, and culture, which is missing here, and they can supplement that, right? But they kind of forget about that and they focus only on the financial aspect. And I think that creates. Yeah.
Would that be the reason? Would that be because mostly when people are migrating to Western cultures, like you said, they're migrating because of financial benefits? Is it because most of these leaders are studying behind in terms of career or age or financial achievements? I mean, they're coming into the country in their mid 20s or late 30s, right? Most American or Western cultures, people start working in their teen years. Is that the reason why?
I think more than that, it could be for some people, Martin. I think more than that, it's because they feel that they would get more respect if they talked in those terms. Because people here would find them more Western if they talked like that. Rather than if they mixed, and they kind of brought their perspective on capability and culture. And yeah, so I'm guessing. I think what you're saying could be true for some people, that they came a little later. What could be also true is that they're trying to impress people around them. But I think they are missing an opportunity. Whatever was the reason, I think they're missing an opportunity because what you bring from your background as an immigrant, no matter where you came from, even if you came from Europe, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. What you bring from your immigrant background is a different way to approach a problem.
Yes.
And that is difficult for somebody else to replicate only through financial payment, right? Because that can only be learned through experience and practice. So, for example, if the Germans have a certain quality orientation, it's not helpful to kind of dismiss that completely when you come from Germany to the US. And you should bring that quality orientation to the US also, right? Apart from learning what is required. Similarly, if Indians have a certain orientation where, Indians do a lot of problem solving with less resources, they're very creative about that. I think a lot of Africans also do that, right? Because they had to face some shortage of resources, so they know how to solve those problems. I think, interestingly, I think Indians and Africans also bring certain artistic culture to anything.
Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's okay to bring that in, rather than only say, hey, tell me about the stock price, right? I mean, okay, fair enough. Anybody can say that. So so I think on strategic planning, every company has their own strategy. I think it's important to build strategy for differentiation. Differentiation means establishing things that cannot be just purchased by somebody else, non-financial barriers to entry, skills, capabilities, and culture, and balancing those things with the financial goals, rather than letting the financial goals take over.
Very good. With that in mind, how should an immigrant leader, an immigrant CEO, push the agenda of the company, yet at the same time balancing their values, their experience, and the new cultures, the new experiences of the community they have moved in and are now leading that community?
Yeah, so let me try and give you a couple of examples, because I don't think there is like one clean answer, but I can give you a couple of examples. So we have 31 factories across the world where people manufacture different things. Many of them, by the way, are in the US, the Western world, the bulk of them. One of the things I do, I've started doing it over the last 2 years now. Every 2 or 3 months, I do a half shift at one of the factories. So I go in for 4 to 8 hours and I get assigned a job to make something on the factory floor. And the reason I do that is that I find a lot of our factory workers are immigrants, actually. And if I don't go there and kind of work on the factory floor, sometimes I don't get to hear their voices, because I don't get to listen to what they have to say. So I started doing that, and I learned a lot from that process. So one thing I learned, for example, is that for those immigrant workers, many of them have not been to university. And even if they have kids that have been born in the US, as parents, they don't know how to support the university application process because they never did it themselves. So we started a program to provide university admissions, coaching, and support to our employees, factory employees' children. For example, right? Again, many of them are immigrants. They are due to the US system. By the way, I have a PhD, but even I don't know the US college application system because I've never gone through it, right? I don't know what it is. So I might need some coaching on that. So because in my mind, building intergenerational wealth means improving health and improving education. Because if you improve health and education, you can always build wealth later. But if you just have a lot of wealth and you don't have good health and education, then your next generation will lose that wealth, right? So I think this is a way of building intergenerational wealth. But I also learned other things by going in there. So I wanted to share an example of what I was willing to do as an immigrant CEO, to go and work on the shop floor. Maybe somebody here may not be willing to do that or may not think about doing that. They may be willing, they may not think about it, right? But I wanted to relate to some of these immigrant workers we have. I think similarly, I've seen I'll give you a second example. I once went to a a leadership conference, which is the top 100 people of our company. This is about 10, 15 years ago. And the CEO at that point, he brought in a cultural expert to talk to everybody about how to manage across cultures. And that cultural expert said that he had traveled to different parts of the world and therefore he had the expertise to talk to people, right? And he said something like, hey, if you are uh, in Asia, then you should speak slowly and loudly so that people will understand you. So everybody looked towards me, and I said, well, if you go to Asia and speak slowly and loudly, people will think you're mad. Like, it's like there's something wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
So what I learned from that experience, and hopefully I was able to change it, I thought it was insulting. I made a joke about it. I thought it was insulting, actually. But now what I do is, when we go to these management conferences where we have people from different parts of the world, rather than getting an expert from somewhere else, I make sure we choose people who've come from different parts of the world to come and present and speak. And we make sure it's not just the leadership, like the top 5 people, right? But we give an opportunity to more people to present and speak. It builds their confidence. But it also shows people, the other people in the room, not to fall into the stereotype trap, right? Like, don't assume that if somebody is coming from China, then they only, can speak in Chinese and they can only eat some food and, they talk very fast or whatever, right? All that stuff, right?
Only an immigrant CEO can see that and see what a solution that must be for everybody.
Yeah. So,
and this speaks to the diversity we bring to the workplace.
No.
Ahead.
And I was going to give you a third example.
Yeah.
And then, I was going to give it back to you. I remember joining calls where the first 5 or 7 minutes, the CEO and the leadership team would keep talking about the football or the baseball game that took place on the weekend, while there are 20 people on the call globally who don't know what that is, right? They have no idea what is that baseball or football, because that's only from the US. And I think those are also, without realizing it, you're excluding people by, talking about things that only you understand. And, so we said, hey, we made a rule more recently. If you want to do that, you have to first explain what that is. And also, you should also invite other people from other countries to talk about a sports event in their home country. And of course, as a result of that, nobody does that anymore. Nobody talks about, the baseball or the football game. But I think these are all...
So at Belden, how are you breaking ice in a conference room now?
So one of the things we've really focused on right now is health for our employees. So we typically break ice more by, talking about, somebody would say, hey, over this weekend, I ran a half marathon, or, I did a hike with my family. So we encourage people to talk about healthy habits, maybe some interesting, social event they participated in, some volunteering work they did. We find that's more translatable for anybody across the world. To say that, hey, I spent 3 hours this weekend volunteering in the soup kitchen. Oh, okay. Everybody knows what that means, right? So
yes, absolutely.
So we break ice like that.
If you had an opportunity to speak at a college that has a majority of immigrants as students that are looking to go into leadership places, what are some of the core values you would want them to take with them as they go into their new workplaces?
Yeah. I think the first thing is, when you come out of a university system, you've been conditioned to think that you've learned a lot. Right? Hey, you went to university for 4 years, right? You learned a lot. I think the way I would change that is, you have learned how to learn, but you have a lot to learn. What university has taught you is there is a process by which you can learn something, right? So first of all, be very humble about what you've learned. Be more open about things that people need you to learn. In fact, even if you're asking a question to uh, an AI system, right? A good question to ask is really, hey, what are the skills that companies and teams really value nowadays, and how can I learn them, right? And that's a good question to ask. So I think really it's the curiosity about what what more do you need to learn. That's one. I think the second thing is um, be brief. You know, people's time is valuable. Your time is valuable. Uh, listen more. Be brief. Sometimes people don't realize this, especially early in their careers. They keep rambling. It's long, long time. Be brief. Be respectful of people's time. And then the third thing is, and we talked about that. If you come from a certain culture, be authentic about it. There's no need to hide it. Be authentic about it, but also be constructively critical about it. If there are things that your culture does which need to improve, it's okay to say, hey, but be constructively critical. You should say, what are you going to do to help that improvement? So be authentic about that.
Very interesting. So, legacy is a big issue for you, right? Can we jump into
Sure.
legacy?
Yeah, I think from a professional perspective, and I mentioned this before, I feel, Martin, that we must leave every role we come into, we must leave it better for the next person who's going to come to that role, right? That's our biggest legacy. Sometimes just doing your job really well so that you establish better processes and a better baseline for the next person, that's a great achievement. So I think for me, that legacy, that the professional aspect of legacy is important. I think from a broader perspective, though, I feel, so first of all, we have multiple stakeholders, right? We have customers, we have employees, we have the community, we have investors, people who own our stock. And you need to balance from a legacy perspective for each of these communities, right? So you don't want to be known as a person who was only focused on the stock markets, or only focused on employees,
Yes.
or only focused on government, relations or community. I think finding that balance is important. It's difficult, by the way. You have to work hard to kind of find that balance. But if you can help each of these communities create intergenerational wealth or success, and that comes through, first of all, physical and mental health, second, education, and third, money, right? So in that order. But if you can create these communities, whether it's your employees, your stockholders, your customers, if you can make their lives better, if you can make sure they have an opportunity for education, and if you can make sure that they make respectable amount of money so that they can look after themselves and their families, I think that's legacy. That's, to me, is more important than putting your name on a college building or buying some asset.
So some CEOs are gonna say, I want to see my name on a stadium billboard for the next 2 years. Why should they buy into your legacy
I
perspective?
think if you do that for a community, then those community people will get together and buy the name for you on the stadium billboard, which is better than you buying it yourself. See, if you help a whole community do better, if you help a number of people, whether it's customers, employees, shareholders, do better, at some point they will recognize your legacy. I think it's more important for other people to recognize your legacy versus you pushing it in their face and saying, my name's got to be on the stadium. I think people don't respect that really. I mean, they may respect it because you're rich and they have to somehow agree with you. But I don't think in the long term people remember those kinds of actions. Think about, think about, I'll give you an example. You know, go back 5 years. And do you remember more if your manager or somebody else in, position of authority made you feel good and comfortable? Or would you remember more if they happened to give you some small extra bonus?
I'm an immigrant, so that's a tough one, right? Um, I think if I was speaking for me, I would remember more the deed than the
Yeah.
gift.
And I think if multiple people remember deeds, then at some point your legacy will take the form of some kind of gift, right? It'll happen. Think of some of the greatest names we have around us. They didn't build those names, they didn't put their names themselves, right? Somebody else put their name on something.
Yes, they did. So let me just
Okay.
hold you to the fire
Yeah.
here, right? Because you have investors at Belden who own stock for your company,
Yeah.
right? And they have a certain expectation for you to make a profit for them and kind of help them build their legacy
Yeah.
that way. How are you playing between that fine line between being responsible to your shareholders, but at the same time being responsible to those who generate the wealth for the
Yeah.
shareholders?
No, that's a great discussion. So first of all, right now, our stock is doing pretty well, and our shareholders seem to be happy. What I've learned, uh, Martin, is that the best shareholders, the shareholders that really matter, are the ones who are looking for the stock prices going up over 3 to 5 years and not next month, right? So those shareholders are the ones who really matter. Some of the other shareholders come and go. They do some short buying, short selling, and they go away. But the really committed shareholders, the ones that you want to hang on to, they think about 5 years, 10 years, that horizon. And if you take that category of shareholders, then it's actually quite overlapped with the interests of your workers and customers. The problem is when you think only of the shorter term shareholders, those who are buying and selling every day and hoping that they can make a neat profit. But if I leave those aside and if I go to the longer term shareholders, they ask me a simple question. Why is your company going to be differentiated? Why are you different from other people who supply something similar? And when I tell them that we are different not because of what we sell, but because of how we sell it and how we make it, and because we're building skills, capabilities, and culture, because it's possible what we sell today, we may not sell tomorrow. AI is coming, it could change our business. We may sell something different, right?
Absolutely.
But how will not change. And when I tell them that we are building capabilities that are creating this differentiation, they feel very happy. One of the things we have figured out, for example, is that factory workers, especially in developed countries, factory workers will be in short supply. There are not many people who want to be a factory worker, right?
Yes.
So it's going to be they're going to be in short supply. So the companies that will attract the best factory workers for the long term will be those who allow them to be more productive, more safe, more educated. So the way I express this in my company is we want to convert our factory workers from bus drivers to airline pilots. We want them to, they're both in the business of transportation. We want them to go more distance safely in a better environment, which means by providing more systems, more technology in the factory, we can upgrade those factory workers. And if they can create more output, they get more wages, but our shareholders also benefit. But it takes time. You can't do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
To upgrade a system like that can take 3 to 5 years. You have to train people.
In a in a scenario where in your industry that upgrade may take 3 to 5 years, and this puts me in a conversation I was hoping we would delay before we get there. Yet we are in this very environment where AI and robots are really predictive on how they will change the marketplace. For Belden specifically, for you, what are you doing to guarantee your employees employment in the next 5 to 10 years, yet at the same time improve productivity and profits for your shareholders?
So we think of manufacturing skills. Let's start with manufacturing, and we can also talk about back office. But we think of manufacturing skills as we think of manufacturing as two types: skilled manufacturing and kind of more routine manufacturing.
Labor.
Yeah, and I would even put it as kind of unskilled manufacturing. So what I think is going to happen is there are certain unskilled manufacturing processes and also some dangerous manufacturing processes, like dealing with heavy loads, dealing with metals, plastics, dealing with hot environments, right? Those will move rapidly towards robotics and AI type technologies. But for the skilled manufacturing, the role of AI and robotics will be what I think of as a co-pilot. Remember, I gave you the analogy with moving from a bus driver to a pilot. It's more of a co-pilot.
Yeah.
They will. So I'll give you an example where we're already doing this right now. We are giving our workers certain glasses with cameras where they can look at the machine, and if it's not working properly, and then we can use some AI to figure out what's wrong with the machine. And it increases the fault identification process, speed, efficiency. It gets resolved quickly, and that factory worker can get more productive, versus now he's waiting for a long time for somebody to come and then figure out what's wrong. So in a number of places, we've already started doing small things and becoming bigger and bigger by the day, where the workers becoming more efficient because of AI. So I don't see AI as replacing the skilled workers. I see it as replacing the unskilled workers and the dangerous jobs.
Okay.
And also on the back office side, for example, sales lead qualification, marketing collateral development. The reality is that you still need some human being to kind of orchestrate all that and manage the quality of that. So yeah, we are using it more and more, and that's important. But I don't see it as eliminating, the brain job.
The human capacity.
Yeah, what I see getting eliminated is, if you had 5 workers who were only doing copy paste from some other source, that might get eliminated. But if you had a creative person who's bringing some human element to it, that's not going to get eliminated.
So you've answered the concerns that your teams may have in regards to AI. What about the other side of it, which is profit margins for your investors?
So there are 2 things going on with AI. First of all, there was previously what is called precision AI. That's been around for 30 years, 30, 40 years. So for example, if you want to dispense an exact dose of medication to a patient, you use precision AI. But then over the last 4 years, there has been something called predictive AI or generative AI, which can create, you say, hey, create an image of Martin standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, right? It can create an image. I think the world is now kind of coming back from this generative AI to what is called agentic AI, which combines these two. Agentic AI actually does something. It moves something. It creates something. And a lot of our customers, so coming to the profit margins, right? A lot of our customers are keen to deploy agentic AI for same dangerous jobs, unskilled jobs, heavy loads, etc. And Belden is providing the what we call the IT/OT converged solutions to do that. Because you can't do agentic AI unless you combine your automation system and your enterprise system into one common backbone. They have to talk to each other seamlessly. So we are doing that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, like I mentioned, with the existing people that we have, we are increasing their speed a lot, whether it's in back office or on the shop floor. And that, the prevention of downtime is a big improvement for our shareholders. So those are the ways we are leveraging the AI opportunity.
Okay. So, and how do you see that changing the next few years?
I think, first of all, we should all be honest that there is still a lot more to learn about AI. When somebody comes and says they are an AI expert, it doesn't mean anything, frankly. Everybody's learning, there's a lot to be learned. It's going to be here for the rest of our lives. There is no reason to be in a tearing hurry to somehow adopt AI somehow at any cost. I think the way it's going to play out is sensible companies, sensible customers will start using AI in limited areas, but they will go deep rather than trying to use AI in everything, right? So rather than width, you'll choose a few areas and you'll go deep. And once you're successful in using that and you've been able to, show people that their jobs are not at risk and it's actually helping them and it's kind of creating the opportunity for them to learn new skills, then you will start migrating that capability to more areas. So I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we will see pilots first in a few chosen areas, and then we will see more kind of mass adoption by the end of this decade. That's how I think it's going to get played out.
So let's loop around back to the question of legacy. We did speak about the fruit that, for example, at Belden is what you're doing, what you're ensuring to make sure that your teams and your shareholders are benefiting from, right? But let's look at the general perspective of what immigrant CEOs, immigrant business people, or even immigrant career holders would need to do in terms of building opportunities, creating opportunities that allow them to build a personal legacy.
Yeah, so I think, obviously everybody may have a slightly different perspective or definition of what is personal legacy, but I think at the highest level of abstraction, I think people want to have a great reputation as a leader even after they have stepped out of a role, right? So people want to be remembered even 10 years later, 20 years later as, hey, this was a leader who came and changed something, came and created new value. And I think to do that, to really create that change, you can't do that through copy paste, even if you're very fast at doing copy paste. So just by kind of reading the Western management theory and applying it quickly, and you might feel that you're creating a legacy, but you're actually not creating anything different, and therefore it'll just be seen as the existing system, not as your own personal legacy. I think your own personal legacy can only be established, whether it's in terms of reputation or in terms of wealth creation or in terms of influencing different stakeholders, if you bring your authentic flavor as an immigrant CEO, into that particular thing. So, Belden, over the last 123 years, we've had only 10 CEOs. I'm actually number 10. And a lot of people tell me, oh, it's a great thing, that you, as an immigrant, you're a CEO. I said, well, it's a great thing that Belden is open to making an immigrant the CEO. So I think first of all, we should acknowledge the company's willingness to do that, right? It's not just me. It's first of all, it's them and their people and the team. But now that they have uh, made me the CEO, their expectation was that I will do something different, bring my experiences and authenticity. And I did that, I think, by bringing that whole solutions approach that we had developed in Asia. And now the entire company is behind that. Hopefully, my legacy would be that I changed Belden from a products to a solutions company. But if all I had done was, attend some executive program in Harvard Business School and then kind of take the same Western approach and said, "Hey, I can kind of do it better than some local people," then there would be no real legacy. Sorry, I'm giving you a slightly complex answer, but I hope I'm able to explain.
I am hoping that our listeners are tracking with you because I am, right? And that's really, really profound that you've taken a whole business model, and rather than doing a 360 to it, you did a complementary where it continues to evolve and continues to grow and keep that promise of a 123-year-old company. Because for me, that's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure. Stepping in a place where the industries today have become extremely competitive, and you have a model that has been set for the last by so many CEOs in the last of 100 and some years, and now you have to step in and make that change, yet still be able to keep the promise you have to your shareholders. I think that's profound, which leads me to the next thing, right? When we first started having a conversation, you wanted to talk about um, leadership, and you also wanted to, which we have really talked immensely on leadership. You also wanted to touch on legacy and wealth, and I think we have done that. There's an area that we need to talk about, right? And I'm really excited about, and that would be relationships, right? Immigrants have a tendency of proliferating in certain geographical areas when we migrate, and we all agree on this one simple thing, that when you go to Romans, you want to do as the Romans do, and when you go to a different country, you want to learn the culture of the people that you go to as quickly as possible, and the quickest way to do that is to people who can relate to your culture. So proliferating is not a bad thing. The problem I see for most immigrants is we get stuck in those geographical hemispheres, and we forget that we actually migrated to this country to come and have a profound impact, not just in the communities we're moving to, but also for those of us who value that, the communities we left back home. So when you talk about building relationships, professional relationships, to be able to move yourself from one place to another, walk us through what, for you as an immigrant, building professional relationship and communal relationship looks like.
Yeah, no, first of all, Martin, that's a very good observation. I've seen that in multiple places I've been to, where I find that the immigrant community does not really proliferate. It starts, getting into a little colony, right? It can be potentially limiting. I think, like everything else, you need to have a balance. And
Yeah.
when you go to a new setting, I'm going to say setting because it may not be, sometimes, even moving within a large country, you may be going to a new setting, right? So when you go to a new setting,
Yes.
First of all, it's important to become part of that setting, right? If I put you on stage in a Shakespeare play, you have to, dress like a Shakespeare character, versus if I put you on stage for a different playwright, right? So you've got to become part of the setting. However, even if you become part of the setting and you put on a Shakespeare costume, it's okay to say the dialogue with your own accent.
Mhm.
you can bring your own authenticity to that, even in the even after you've become part of the setting, right? And I think that's the balance to find. So I think there are two or three ways of finding the balance. One, you move to someplace new, you make sure that you are either becoming part of professional organizations or work groups or teams where you are forced to interact with people from uh, the new culture or people from a mixed background who also happen to be there. So if your manager assigns you to a team which is not like that, go and say, be authentic. Say, I moved here so that I could learn from different cultures. I want to be assigned to a different team. No disrespect to my original assignment, but I want to do that, right? Most people keep quiet. And the managers think, they're helping them, but they're not actually helping them. It's condescending. So I think it's okay to to ask for a different setting. But once you're in that setting, it's also okay to say, hey, this is what I can uniquely bring to this setting. So there's no need to change your just because you become part of a broader setting. There's no reason to change your cultural input into that setting. And then, of course, the other thing you pointed out, uh, Arden, you can actually balance a little bit between the professional and the personal context. So you could say, hey, for my family, I may choose to be in a place where 30, 40, 50% of the people are immigrants like myself. But I'm willing to commute to a different place for work where I'm more mixing up with the people I came to become part of, right? And that's another kind of pressure valve you can use. Uh, but my learning has been that when people move to a different country, a different culture, the more you plunge in, it's a little painful initially because you plunge into cold water, right? It's like, but the more you
Yes,
plunge in, the faster
for
you will
sure.
learn how to swim and the faster others will swim with you. So
Yes.
don't be scared. And I think as immigrants, we sometimes come with that mindset where we worry that somebody will challenge us. They will ask us some question about our background or our accent or our language or whatever. There's no reason to,
Happens all the time,
yeah.
right?
There's no reason to. It's okay to be authentic and just say, hey, this is how I learned it. So I've come across some people, Martin, who've tried to be a little extra smart, saying something about either my language or my food or whatever. And I simply say, hey, this is what I have, but I'm very curious about your food or your language. Why don't you take me out to some place? If like somebody said, oh, Indian food smells. I'm like, yeah, I know it's really sometimes it can smell. How about let's try your food? And immediately people get disarmed because they, you know, they're just trying to make you feel smaller because they are worried that you might become bigger than them. Right?
Yes.
That's all. So I think if you
Yes.
counter that, and the way to become bigger than them is actually behaving like the bigger person, not by fighting, but by saying, yeah, let's have your meal.
On the subject of legacy, you have worked for the same company, probably same industry for over 20 years. Over time, how did you continue to develop self because you wanted to have a more impactful legacy for your family and for your shareholders?
I,
And when you delve into that, can we also delve into the struggles of combining the two?
yeah. So first of all, I always had two guiding principles. The first was every 2 to 3 years, I would ask for more responsibility. And it doesn't mean that I would leave my old responsibility. If somebody said, hey, you also need to do that, and I would say, okay, I'll find a way. But every 2 to 3 years, because I believe that every 2 to 3 years you need to kind of renew a little bit. It's a cycle, and learn something new. So I would ask for that, and I'm happy to say that my company gave me that opportunity because I asked for it. Uh, and sometimes it meant doing more work, which had an impact on the family. But I was honest with the family, and I explained to them that uh, there's a little bit of an investment phase, and then we'll have a phase when we can get the benefits of that. So I think immigrant families also have to go through a certain learning curve, right? You have to work hard as an immigrant to start with. You have to prove yourself, and then at some point it can become simpler. Um, but I think immigrant families tend to have that capability. Once they've decided to be immigrants, I think they kind of they are wired to do that. The other principle I had,
Yeah.
Martin, I don't know if it makes sense to everybody, was I always made sure that I was the best candidate for the next level role, but I never asked for that role. I never had any discussion with anybody saying, I need to be promoted.
Mm-hmm.
But I always made sure that when a promotion was available, I was the best candidate. But I never asked for it. I never talked about it.
This is really important for me, if you don't mind my budging in. And I want us to take a deep dive here, if that's okay with you, right? Most immigrants, when they migrate, they're running behind, right? They migrate to the country, they're a little bit older, or they have family needs, or whatever it is, but they're behind, right? And they want to do the catch-up game, because majority of them, they have this ambition, they have these goals that they want to fulfill. Balancing your workplace results and your family requires that you have tough conversations with yourself and also with the family. When you have made those decisions, what does the application phase look like to prepare yourself for the end goal?
So, yeah, it's a great question. So, when I was in Hong Kong, for example, I had that situation where I was running a little behind. Even though I had been sent there for one big project. But after that project, other people came, and I knew I had the skills available, but they came out of the US headquarters, this, that, whatever, right? But they were ahead. And I told my family, I said, for a period of 3 to 5 years, I will end up doing more work, maybe more travel. I even did some education on the side on weekends. I did I did a university program, and there was an investment phase of 3 to 5 years, after which, as kind of jobs opened up, I was always better qualified than the others, even though I had never gone and asked for that job, right? But for 3 to 5 years, there was preparation, and there was family understanding, and there was some open conversations. What I found was that a lot of people, so a lot of people say, if you don't ask, you will not get. I'm not sure. I think there are ways of asking without using words, right? There are ways of asking by preparing and being the best available candidate. And I think
Mhm.
people respect that. And it was interesting. Once I caught up, I was behind. Once I caught up, after that there was no looking back. Then I kept moving, because the people above you are always thinking, we want somebody who whose desire is not the position but the problem. Because if the desire is the position, then as soon as you give them the position, they'll just kind of be happy and they'll stop running. But if their desire is to solve
Yeah.
the problem, they will always find a new problem, and then a new problem, and a new problem. So I think it's an important conversation to have with your family, with your spouse, saying that we are behind, but there are many examples where people have gone ahead, but this is what they had to do. If we are all prepared for that,
Yeah.
then let's do that. And it certainly helps to do more education on the side, whether it's a master's program or a PhD or whatever. I think it's an investment.
So talking about education, I have over time learned this very quickly, and I'm one of those people who are considered slow learners. It takes an experience for me to learn something, and then okay, now I've learned it. Let's go, right? In my 20s, I was very passionate about business in my 20s, but I struggled with understanding how to formally run a business and run it well. Yet, pride did not allow me the opportunity to reach out to others to ask, how do I do this? Not realizing there was a little secret over here that was called mentorship, right? That you find a horse who's been down that road, that is proficient at what they do, and they can walk you through what you need to do, and it gets so combining learning and mentorship for you to get you to the place where you are today. Has this played a key role in your life?
Yeah. So, interestingly, when I first finished high school, the first university program I went to, I actually dropped out of that after 2 years. And then I had to restart a different university program, right? And, again, culturally in the US, it might be acceptable to have a person who's dropped out. It's not an issue. In India, it's not that acceptable, to drop out of university and to, to start a new program. But from that point in time, it was because I I was not really learning anything in the first program. Somebody I spoke with, effectively my first mentor, said, "Listen, it's not too late. It's only 2 years. You still have a long, you know, a path ahead, a life ahead." And
Mhm.
that person provided me some clarity of thinking. Um, and then I changed my program, and of course, I was satisfied, and things worked out well. But similarly, there was a mentor who, helped me choose my career path, because at some point I thought I would like to be a teacher, a professor, and I would like to go down that path. And uh, ironically, my mentor was my professor at university, who said, "This is not the right path for you, because you typically want to keep exploring new things every 2-3 years. You like to learn and then kind of learn new things, and you might find this path a little limiting, because the body of knowledge in teaching, in university teaching, it moves a little slowly over time. It doesn't move that rapidly, so you might want to go into some kind of business path." But again, across time, I've had different mentors. One thing I learned, the reason Martin, I gave you these 2-3 examples is, a good mentor doesn't have to be only one person who's very accomplished and very senior in that profession. Mentorship can come from
Yes.
different sources at different points in time.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I find that today, sometimes if I need advice on a certain topic, I lean towards a certain person. On certain things, I lean towards a another person. But here's an interesting insight. One of my mentors, one of the people I lean towards for advice, is actually somebody on my team. They're, effectively, they're junior to me from a role
Yes.
perspective, but on a certain area of expertise, I treat them as a mentor. So I think my message is, don't be shy in expressing when you need help, and that help can come. Don't stereotype where that help can come from. Find, check with a few people and then choose the right uh, option. And of course, there are many mentors who will show up on their own because they have the wisdom and they can see that you need help. And once in a while, like I went to an industry conference, and somebody who knew Belden came and talked to me and said, I know Belden is doing some work in software, and I can link you to some people. Okay, you know, also good. So again, my big message is, it can come from different sources.
I want to move to other places, but I find myself going back to wealth and relationship and legacy because it's important. I think legacy is such a driving force for majority of people that it has set the pace of what uh, life is, at least in the modern world. When you're thinking about strategy or you're recommending strategies for your teams in consideration of what the immigrants impact is in society, when building meaningful business relationship and global networks, how are you how would you advise immigrants to develop their strengths in those areas?
I think, you know, if somebody's goal is to create a legacy, especially a professional legacy, one of the important things really is to kind of go from a few different things to fewer things. You can't create a legacy in everything, right?
Mhm.
You can't say, hey, I had the best, uh, you know um financial outcomes, and I built the best charitable thing, and I built the best, you can't be best legacy in everything. So I think, especially as an immigrant, right, you're starting a little later, you're running hard, of course. I think it's important to find, through mentorship, through discussion, um, a couple of areas where you want to focus, especially as you get to the middle of your career. It's time to then kind of say, okay, I want to build my legacy around these two or three things. For example, for me, I feel that, Belden has always been a problem solving technology company, an engineering company. But for some time, for about 10, 15 years, it had become like a financial oriented company. And my legacy would be to bring Belden back to its original roots, but with new technology, with agentic AI, edge technology, but with the same kind of, focus in terms of engineering. I think another legacy for me would be to create culture which is very innovative and is not limited only to the managers, but extends to our factory workers, because factory workers will come into short supply. They need to be innovative in order to remain differentiated over time, and then extending that, for us to build intergenerational wealth, which, by the way, in my mind, is health and education first, right? So so those are the kind of the areas I want to focus on. And I can't say that I'll do all that and I'll also be building a new AI model. So that's not the legacy I'm going to build, right? I'm not going to build a brand new AI model. That's not the legacy for me. So I think it's important to kind of narrow down and then really go deeper. Uh, and then of course there's personal legacy, right? Apart from professional legacy, uh, uh, I typically don't talk much about the personal legacy because I like to stay anonymous on some of these things. But one area that I
Yeah.
do work in, just broadly speaking, is on education for young girls. Because at least in India, in Asia, young girls are not uh, prioritized for education. The families, they send the male child for education, but not the girl child. And especially during COVID, a lot of girls dropped out of school.
Mhm.
So I'm building some personal legacy there, including actually taking part in the construction of a school, etc., etc. But I typically don't talk too much about that.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So we're getting to the top of the hour, and we have a tradition in our show. But before we get to the tradition of the show, is there something you're sitting there thinking Martin should have asked me this question, but he has. Go for it.
I think there's one question, and I think we've touched upon it. Frequently, immigrant leaders, they get stuck at a level, they get like a 25, $50 million business, they're not able to go beyond that, right? They get
Mhm.
stuck. And we've talked about different factors. One could be, them not becoming part of the setting, them kind of staying in a certain community trap. Uh, but I think one reason that happens is that they don't truly believe in building teams. They they tend to build teams that are loyal to them, that agree with them,
Mhm.
rather than teams that challenge them. Because they feel that we are already challenged enough as immigrants. Why should other people challenge us, right? But you need to build
Yeah.
teams that challenge you if you want to grow beyond that 25, $50 million business.
So for them to do that, I have to ask this: how or when does an immigrant leader get to a point where they determine that the challenge they are receiving from their teams is an honest, professional, well-meaning challenge rather than it is a personal challenge?
I think what I would do is, first of all, I would assume every challenge is honest and well meaning. Because sometimes we can overthink these things, right? I would just assume it's, even if there was a certain tone, I would assume it's ignorance rather than arrogance that is in the tone.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because it takes a couple of cycles for you to get the credibility. So sometimes somebody challenges you and they have a little bit of a kind of hidden message there. Then you rise to the challenge. Then the next time it's a little smaller. The third time it vanishes, right? Because now they know that you can do that. So I wouldn't overthink it. But yes, obviously, I think we all have the sense if somebody is crossing a line. And if somebody's crossing the line, you can always um, call it out and say, sorry, I don't want to engage with you. But the reason I raised this point, Martin, I think you caught it, was because too many people assume that there is a hidden agenda in the challenge, therefore they don't bring in people who challenge them, and therefore they remain in a small size business. I think it's better to
Yes.
take the risk that maybe one or two people out of 10 people might have a hidden agenda, but the other seven or eight might be okay. It's okay to take that risk. And I think that's part of the price you have to pay as an immigrant leader, right? Some risk.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So finally, we are getting at the
Yeah.
top of the hour. we have a tradition in this show, and Belden is doing a fantastic job of helping companies that are creating AI create their infrastructure. So here's my question for you: what would you ask our listeners to ask AI on whatever platform they use that would benefit them?
Yeah, I think we talked about this briefly earlier, but let me go back to that point. I think a really good question that people can ask the AI platform they use is, what skills and experiences are growth oriented teams and companies seeking, and how can I gain those skills and experiences? And I think the benefit of asking that question is that you're harnessing that AI's kind of vast knowledge in terms of the width of, like, what are many different companies and teams looking at, but then it's making it specific to you. uh, because maybe the AI is going to ask you, tell me something about yourself before I can answer the question. So you're harnessing the width, but you're getting a more specific answer, because I think really, no matter what we feel, there is obviously there's always, sorry, some skill or experience that we can gain to become more competitive. So I would ask that question.
Our guest is been amazing. His global journey perfectly has mirrored the mission of our show. He has spotlighted immigrants, leaders, driving, and what innovation driving is all about. Sir, thank you very much for making the time for us. Please tell our listeners, if they want to get a hold of you, where can they find you on social media?
First of all, thank you, Martin. This was a very enjoyable conversation, and I've had a chance after many years maybe to discuss so many topics together of such interest. The best place to find me, by the way, is on LinkedIn. If you just look for my name, and you could send me a message through that. Another option is to find me on Belden's website, but those would be the best ways in the public domain.
Before we sign off, what should the public expect from Belden for the next 5 years?
I think Belden is doing something very um interesting and also very difficult. We are doing the plumbing for the new technology that is being built around agentic AI. And what a lot of people, I think, appreciate is that, for AI to work. So, I'll give you an example. Sometimes you see a movie like Mission Impossible where a person is able to control a satellite from their iPad. It's great.
Yeah.
But that can't happen in real life because those networks are not all connected. And for agentic AI to work, where literally agentic AI can reach anywhere, do anything, to do it safely with cybersecurity, with speed, with integrity, we need new plumbing. So it's a difficult job. We are doing it. We have the expertise over 123 years to bring IT and OT together to do this converged plumbing. So I think in the next 5 years, we should see Belden as a leader in that space.
We wish you the very best of luck, sir. We are here to cheer for you. We envy your mission, but we know it's in that envy that you'll see success. And we are so grateful you made the time to come to the Immigrant Nation podcast. Listen, if there is a way we can support you now and in the future, we are here to do that. Please reach out to us, let us know. Our team will stay in touch because we need to connect on social media and things
Okay.
like that. But we have shared a bond today, and I hope I can equally be of benefit to you here in the future.
Oh, thank you, Martin. I appreciate the offer, and I will certainly reach out to you.
Thank you so very much. Bye bye.